Hey guys, welcome back to Coronageddon.
Are you tired of us yet?
Probably. I'm really tired of this topic, to be honest. But we're going to be talking a little bit more of the good, the bad, the ugly. So mostly good, because these are things that you can actually implement to help you. These are things that people are studying and recommending towards each other in different countries. Some really great things. So in our last video, we spoke about people that are immunocompromised, especially in the heart disease area and diabetes area, and how certain medications can have you more susceptible to becoming infected with the coronavirus.
Or having complications.
And so we made some suggestions as far as lifestyle goes to say, listen, like, this really sucks. And here are some ways to help counteract it with our lifestyles. Today, we are going to make some recommendations for people that are specifically immunocompromised, as well as people that are not. And these recommendations seem to be helping a lot of people counteract active, like COVID-19 symptoms. So Tristan knows more about it than I do, so why don't you take it away?
Yeah, real quick though, just to address the last video, hopefully we didn't offend anyone with what we were talking about. We had zero intention of writing anybody off or being judgmental or anything like that. Our goal really is to provide reassurance, right? We're not saying anything about this is going to cure COVID-19 or you don't have to worry about COVID-19. What we're really hoping for people to get from these videos is we aren't powerless, right? And it's not a hopeless situation.
So for instance, if you are immunocompromised, you can still eat really good food and help your body heal and repair and bounce back. It's always a good idea to eat foods that build the body up versus break it down. And especially if you're immunocompromised, it's even 10 times more important at that state.
Right.
So
The reason why we haven't talked about some of this stuff before now is because it's just starting to come to light, right? We are still learning a ton about COVID-19, how it operates, how it's similar to previous diseases like SARS. It actually is SARS. It's like the second coming of SARS, and this time it's evolved. But as we learn more information is disseminating, and we're trying to just keep you updated on what we do know about it. But this most recent information that we've learned is extremely promising. But before we go into that, we need to talk about why this particular virus is so damaging, right? You've probably heard from many different sources that this is different from other diseases. This isn't just another form of the flu that's going around. This one tends to create serious symptoms for like 20% of people. And a lot of those people are not necessarily compromised in any other way. So we really do want to acknowledge that as well, that this is not just something that goes after only older people or only sick people. And one of the reasons why it is so strong and so contagious is that it does a really good job of latching onto our cells. It has those spikes that you've heard about. That's why it's called the coronavirus. That stands for crown, right? It's the Spanish word for crown. But it also has these features on its surface. They're called cleavages. Basically, they allow it to attach to virtually any cell in your body, which is somewhat rare for a virus. And that means that it can get in anywhere. In fact, they've even found it in the central nervous system, right? So it's very difficult for our bodies to resist it, which is why so many people are getting it and passing it on to others. But it also has some features that make it particularly damaging. And one of the big features is something called NLRP3. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into details on how it works. I spent an hour reading all the articles about it, and it is dense stuff. You need to be a biologist to really understand this on any meaningful scale. But basically what this NLRP3 does is it causes the stimulation and production of inflammatory cytokines, they're called, which also not something you need to know other than it causes a lot of damage to the tissues, right? These cytokines are in a normal, healthy response, they're helpful because they help repair damage. But this essentially causes an overdrive of the cytokine production system, which causes so much damage to take place that the body can't recover from it. And this NLRP3 starts that process, which makes it very, very scary. But here is where the good news comes in. I'm going to show you a couple of charts to help explain this, and hopefully they'll come through screen to screen. We'll see. Okay. So here's the first chart. You've seen this one a million times. This is the chart showing the kind of the fatality rate or complication rate of different age groups with COVID-19. And basically, hopefully you saw that, but we already know this. Like, the older you get, the higher the likelihood of problems developing, right? But here's an even more interesting chart that is going to be even harder to read, but we'll give it a shot anyway. This is the melatonin levels in different age groups. And if you look at that carefully, you'll see that it is almost exactly the opposite of the last chart. And why that's interesting is that it, as a total correlation, by the way, at this point, we're not giving any causation here. It shows an almost perfect inverse correlation with complications, meaning the more melatonin a person has, it appears the less likelihood that COVID-19 is a death sentence for them.
Which is why a lot of people are asking the question, why are children not dying from this? Well, it's because they're producing the most melatonin. And I mean, like, children and babies especially are very, very vulnerable populations. However, they have the highest production of melatonin. So there are some scientists that are putting two and two together and speculating that this is a cause for that.
Right. People a lot smarter than us, right, that are doing all of this research, all this work, that have all of this knowledge already about the different diseases and how things work. But it's not just that there's this correlation going on, because there's probably a million things that would correlate similarly. But there are things we already know about melatonin that provide a lot of weight to this theory that it's the key. And the biggest thing about it is that melatonin has been shown to inhibit that NLRP3 component that is found on COVID-19, right? So the NLRP3 is what causes the cytokine explosion, cytokine storm, they call it. And melatonin inhibits that NLRP3.
So if you're actively sick, you probably want to take some melatonin.
Well, even if you're not actively sick, it might not be a terrible idea to start building up your melatonin levels. And by the way, I'm saying this as someone who is very, very, very not a fan of taking melatonin.
And I was going to say, like, we don't sell melatonin. We never recommend melatonin. It's a hormone. It's a hormone that, you know, you should be producing naturally by dimming your lights down at night, like not looking at blue light screens like TVs and cell phones, for instance. So yeah, we're not super comfortable recommending this. Also, talk to your doctors about this, you guys. Like, we're not your doctors. We're just sharing with you some information that we've come across.
Right. But here's the deal. The amounts of melatonin that you might need in order to provide sort of a protective maintenance dose are extremely small. And when I say extremely small, I mean, we could not find doses that small at the grocery store. We went to a natural grocers and went to their melatonin section. They had probably 15, maybe 20 different products. Not a single one of them was in the doses that we're talking about here.
Right. But like super low doses.
So what we're talking about with melatonin, the recommendations given, and we'll post a link to this article if you are daring enough to dive into it. But the person who wrote the article recommends, as a maintenance dose, somewhere between 0.2 and 0.5,
which is super small,
milligrams. To, Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're immunocompromised, you definitely want to read this article, talk to your doctor about it. I mean, we were at the store today buying melatonin. Why? Because we have someone who is immunocompromised in our house, and it's Tristan. So
It's me. I mean, by all of the different standards out there, I am immunocompromised as much as anyone. So, but 0.2 to 0.5 is what's recommended there. Now, when we went to Natural Grocers and we looked, the smallest dose that we could find was a full milligram. They have liquid drops as well, but it was like even a fourth of a teaspoon was still 1.5 milligrams. So we were talking like it was just way too difficult to figure out. So what we did is we got the 1 milligram size, and we're just going to cut them in half, maybe cut them in fourths, depending on how much we want to do. And we'll just do that. The key though is timing is important on this. You want to take it at night, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 hours before bed, preferably though 2 to 3 hours after you eat. What does that mean? It means you need to finish eating earlier in the day, preferably while it's still light outside. Otherwise it does kind of inhibit your natural melatonin production.
Right.
Where you fall on that spectrum, 0.2 or 0.5, depends on how much you think you might need, right? If you're a very healthy person and you just want to give yourself some extra protection, 0.2 is probably more your speed. If you're in my boat, you might lean a little bit more towards the 0.5 side. Now there's more to it though. If you're doing the melatonin, you also, and here comes another recommendation that I never ever make, you also probably want to take ascorbic acid. And the reason why I'm specifically saying ascorbic acid and not vitamin C, which is where I'd normally go with this, is that I don't know how vitamin C plays into this versus ascorbic acid.
Because ascorbic acid's the only thing that's been researched right now.
Right. And here's the thing. We've mentioned this a million times. We're not against ascorbic acid. It's not a poison. We just don't like the ongoing use, especially in high doses. Right. However, an epidemic could be a reasonable exception to this rule.
Right.
So, what were the doses he recommended on this one? So
we could just link this and people can
we'll just link this, but I want to just get the numbers out there. It looks 10 like 10 to 18 grams per day. That's a lot though. So be careful with that. Ascorbic acid will give you diarrhea if you hit your tolerance limit. So depending on whether you've been taking it in the past or not, you might find you hit that limit pretty early. And you don't want to do that all at once either. Ideally it would be like 1 gram an hour while you're awake, but that's
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work. But
I'd
again,
rather just take the melatonin.
But we're trying to empower people, right? Everyone's stuck at home anyway. It's not like you're far from wherever you keep your ascorbic acid. You're trapped in there. And again, I'm just passing on this information because it's very compelling. And the ascorbic acid really helps the melatonin to do its thing, which is why they kind of go hand in hand. I'm not going to do ascorbic acid. I'm just going to say that I already take vitamin C, and I'm just going to keep going with that.
There's other things you can do too.
Yeah. And then there's one last thing that seemed to be really helpful, although ascorbic acid helps with the production of it, but that's nitric oxide. So I don't have any dosing recommendations to pass on as far as nitric oxide goes, but they do have nitric oxide supplements.
You know how you produce nitric oxide naturally is through exercising.
Yeah.
So keep exercising, but don't over-exercise, as that creates unhealthy inflammatory responses versus healthy inflammatory responses.
And it also can depress your immune system.
Yes.
So
exercising to a rate that your body is comfortable with and not overstressing your body. My favorite nitric oxide supplements are ones from beets versus other kinds. So look for those that are beet based.
There's actually a company, they're based out of here in Utah called, I don't even know how to say it, Zhou, Z-H-O-U. And they make a beet nitric oxide supplement.
So,
So you could try doing that. I don't know how much.
So if you're immunocompromised and can't exercise, then nitric oxide might be something that you want to start taking.
Interesting fact about nitric oxide. So if you remember that chart that we showed you with the melatonin levels, there's a little bit of a gap before it really starts peaking out with infants. For the first 3 months of life, newborns have very low levels of melatonin. They haven't started producing yet, but they still are not vulnerable to COVID-19 like older people are. And it's because they have crazy high levels of nitric oxide in their system.
Right.
So
there you go.
Pretty cool. So hopefully this is helpful as something to look at. We're comfortable passing on these recommendations, for one, because they are compelling, but for two, because they're fairly low risk things.
Right.
Not long term. Please don't start taking melatonin and ascorbic acid every day for the next year. That is not a good idea. But maybe for the next few weeks until
it starts warming up,
until you feel less concerned about being exposed and vulnerable to it. It's very low risk. We're doing very, very small doses with the melatonin. Ascorbic acid short term is fine. You'll just have to make up for it later with the whole food vitamin C. And nitric oxide, as far as I know, fairly low risk as well if you're doing that in small doses in small periods of time.
I find it really interesting that these are all, except for the high dose vitamin C, like the nitric oxide, like we all should be exercising, right? No judgment, because I haven't exercised since January 5th. So there's zero judgment there. But we all should be exercising for our immune system support, right? We all should be sleeping and producing enough melatonin, so if we have sleep issues, again, part of my problem too. So switching down lights at night, like I said earlier, no blue lights, that's all going to switch off your melatonin production. So hopefully that's something that you can keep at a good level in a healthy manner versus have to supplement for it. But supplement for it anyways if you want, because you feel like you need the extra boost, or if you are immunocompromised, read through that article that I'm going to put here in the comments or in the little blip thing, and look it up and do your own research and see what resonates with you guys.
Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was empowering. And thank you for watching.
Yeah, you guys, as always, just keep healing. Healing happens. And that's it. Until next time.
Bye.